Welcome everyone to the Passivhaus Accelerator's 13th Global Passivhaus Happy Hour of our second year and episode number 65. Thanks for joining us. I'm Prudence Ferreira, senior member of the Carbon Neutral Design Group at BR+A Consulting Engineers and lead their Passivhaus team and am your host every Wednesday night right here. We're an inclusive gathering. Whether you're joining us for the 65th time or the first time, you are in the right place. And if you're joining us by video, welcome, and please check out the rest of the amazing videos that we've got. Over the weekend, I had an interesting experience. I summited my first peak in New Hampshire's presidential range, which are all these little 52, 5,000 to 6,000, some 4,000 foot peaks. And at first, having lived in Alaska and California, I'm like, yeah, whatever, you call these mountains, right? But man, this little 5,200 foot peak kicked my butt. And the reason why is because the trail was not really a trail. It was all boulders, rock hopping, every single step. You had to innovate. Like, it wasn't just normal hiking on a trail. It was a little nutty. But it really made me think about and have newfound respect for endeavors which may not seem that challenging initially, but take intense concentration and innovative approach at every step. And I started thinking about how we on this call, because it was a long hike, we're all working in different jurisdictions with different community dynamics, supply chain constraints, legislative constraints. And though carbon emission reductions are increasingly central to design conversations, we still have a lot of challenge ahead. And the path may be full of irregular obstacles. So this episode, I'd like to invite you all to unmute yourselves and help me kick off the show by recognizing and toasting to our endurance. Here's the endurance.
Endurance, everyone.
Yeah. All right. And part of that endurance is also the hybrid conference that just happened in New York, which was a great success. Thanks to Ken and everyone at NAPHN. And we're still here at episode 65. And at least in some parts of the world, daily life seems to be getting back to normal. And over the last year and a half, virtual meetings and telework have significantly reduced the environmental impacts from travel. But I just read a really interesting paper that highlights the environmental impact of the internet. And I wanted to share with you all some important stats that might just impact how you select your settings in virtual meetings. So what I found out is that worldwide, the carbon footprint of internet data storage and transmission adds up to 97 million tons of carbon dioxide annually. And that, just for context, is about the same annual carbon emissions of Sweden and Finland together. And also requires enough water to fill more than 1 million Olympic-sized swimming pools annually, and gobbles up land equivalent to the combined area of 3 of the world's megacities combined. That's Mexico City, Rio de Janeiro, and New York City. So the other thing is that if remote work due to restrictions continues, and also because we all like it, through the end of 2021, the internet's global footprint could grow by as much as 34 to 35 million tons of carbon dioxide, and the water footprint equivalent to 317,200 Olympic-sized swimming pools, and the land footprint by the equivalent area of Los Angeles, if we keep doing what we're doing. So the thing that I wanted to bring home to you all is that the major determinant of the environmental footprint of the internet activities is video, and especially high definition video. Voice-only internet meetings have on average a 96% lower environmental impact than a video conference, this paper that I read found. So even reducing video, streaming video quality reduces its environmental impact by 86%. So I don't know if some of you have noticed, but when I'm not talking on this meeting, I often just put up my picture. Behave as you like. There you have it. Knowledge is power. I just wanted to share that, and I'll put the link to the paper in the chat. Now to the episode. We've got a great show. We're going to hear part 2 of a 2-part series on the design challenges and plans for a single unit retrofit in an 83 unit co-op in New York City. And if you missed Mario Bissessar on yesterday's episode on construction tech. Be sure to catch the recording. He talked about the details and construction involved in this high performance retrofit of historic masonry building. But first, over to Zach.
Thank you, Prudence. And that's the perfect segue to me introducing a video for everybody to watch. So we're gonna, and I also traveled to New York City. So I'm not exactly the avatar of climate mitigation this week. But I do want to say how much the New York City, how much the NAPHN conference was a success and how wonderful it was to be there. And part of what was really great about the conference was being able to do the project tours. So I carried around my iPhone and took a video of the Sendero Verde tour. And I wanted to share it with you. There's no audio, but this gives you a sense of the scale of the project, and it's just so awesome that buildings like this now are happening for us in our passive house realm. So here goes. All right. So with that, let's go into some breakout rooms. I hope you enjoyed that. We are going to go into breakout rooms for just a few minutes. Let's see, get it set up here. So rapid fire introductions, please make sure you get around your to everybody, and we'll see you back in a few. So I'm going to make a couple of announcements and then hand it off to Prudence, who will introduce our special guest, Jane Sanders. And I will start by reminding folks that every week on the Passivhaus Accelerator website, we publish a weekend preview that talks about what's coming up in the coming week. And we do that in our article section, so you can navigate to that. Our article section is very robust right now, so because of the work of Mary James and the authors of it for the Passivhaus Accelerator magazine, which is an issue about retrofits. I'll talk about that in a moment. But there's a weekend preview, construction tech, tonight's happy hour. We were just talking about a really fabulous interview with Melanie Thomas of the South Baltimore Community Land Trust that Mary James and Ilka Cassidy conducted. Check that out. It's really interesting about Passivhaus and the connections with climate justice and environmental quality. Tomorrow, please join us for a Passivhaus component spotlight. We're doing a spotlight with Stow Corp, and we'll have Thomas and Zach from Stow Corp presenting about air and moisture barriers in complete wall systems, the importance of detailing, continuity, and sequencing. So they'll start with a 20 to 25-minute presentation that goes into the details in the building science, and then we'll have questions from the floor. So this is a great chance for you to learn about what's going on there and their approach to wall systems, and to drill into what you're curious about and what you want to find out about there. So we'll see you then. Tomorrow. Revitalizing Communities, the retrofit issue, Passivhaus Accelerators magazine issue just got released. It's really tremendous, full of all sorts of stories around Passivhaus retrofits. Thank you, Mary James, for your expertise and leadership in making that issue happen. So there's a link to that. Lots of cool gatherings and conferences, a lot of stuff happening around NAACP centering equity in the sustainable building sector, including some meetings. There's actually one that's about to happen in 43 minutes, and then a couple that will go on next week. And then we have Passivhaus Open Days coming up on June 25th through 27th with a link. On to socials, lots of great stuff, of course, as always, including Building Science Fridays with Mark Willey, U.S. Engineered Wood, ventilation and certification with Michael Franco of Hvc. So check that out. Educational resources as well. And I think that's it for me now. So with that, Prudence, please take the floor.
Thanks, Zach. Lots going on. All right, so I have the pleasure this episode of introducing our featured guest, Jane Sanders. She is an architect and certified passive house designer whose work focuses on sustainability and preservation. She spent 12 years working on historic preservation and adaptive reuse at her former firm, and then had her own urban residential firm where she completed 3 Interfit certified row house retrofit projects and a whole SCAD of apartment renovations. And then since joining Henson Architecture in 2019, she's been focused on larger building retrofits to comply with Local Law 97. While continuing to also do passive house retrofits of residential buildings. She was also recently selected by the New York City Department of Buildings to serve as a member of the 2019 NYCECC Residential Advisory Committee to review and provide recommendations on amendments to the Energy Code. So she's got a lot going on. Jane also, yay, lives in a passive house in Park Slope, Brooklyn. Jane, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to hear what you have to share.
All right, thank you, Prudence. I'm really happy to be here, and the happy hour has been a great community. I've been joining since the beginning of COVID. And I'm happy to see a lot of the faces back that were here last night and a lot of new faces. So anyone who missed Mario's presentation last night, it'll be the recording will be online later. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. So the project I'm presenting tonight is a retrofit of a single apartment in a pre-war multifamily building as a model that could be repeated throughout the building and throughout the city. And this is the neighborhood of Prospect Park South in Brooklyn. And it's an area where you can see there's a lot of buildings of this building type. Pre-war 6 to 8 stories, masonry load-bearing buildings with big roofs that would be great for solar. And so how do we retrofit these types of buildings? There's 3 approaches you can take. One is to retrofit from the outside with, a panelized system or exterior insulation. And there's a lot of people doing great work retrofitting buildings with tenants in place by doing everything from the outside. But a lot of building owners aren't ready to undertake a project like that. And then the other approach would be to do it from the inside, but do the whole building at once. And it almost never happens that buildings like these are vacant and available to retrofit. So the third approach is to do it 1 unit at a time when landlords and rental buildings, when landlords have tenant turnover and they need to update kitchens and bathrooms and renovate, or in co-ops and condos when things need to be upgraded. And co-ops could have building standards in their alteration agreements that require certain techniques, when apartments are renovated. And over time, it's a path to get there. So this is the building on the corner of 18th Street and Albemarle Road. It's a third floor apartment, so right here. And as you can see, the retrofitted apartment doesn't really stand out other than you can notice the different windows. And there's 2 small penetrations in the brick for the HVAC system, which I'll talk more about later. And the facade on Albemarle Road is south facing, and some of the biggest windows are on that facade and has a great tree for shade. And then the other facade is east facing. So this is the plan of the building, and this is the unit in the corner circled in green here. This is the existing and proposed floor plan. So the typical pre-war apartments have large bedrooms and living rooms, but very separate kitchen areas. And it was a 2-bedroom, and my clients wanted to fit in 3 bedrooms plus a flexible office space. So it was fitting a lot into a small footprint of 1,300 square feet, but you know, we made it very efficient and made a more open layout with a more open kitchen. And it was important to keep views through to these 2 nice street trees that I've shown in green on the plan. So this is the space after we gutted it. The apartment was in very bad shape, so it really needed a full gut anyway. So it was a great opportunity to do this type of a retrofit. And as you can see, the main structure is steel, but there's wood floor joist construction like you would have in a townhouse. And the walls are masonry load bearing. So this shows the exterior wall assembly through the process. The first photo on the upper left is the existing conditions. As you can see, it was in bad shape. Then we stripped it down to the existing brick and joists. We insulated at the floor and the ceiling. Even though we have neighbors above and below, we still insulated there because it did a lot for soundproofing, and it also, in the PHPP, it really improved our cooling load. Not as big of an effect on the heating load. And then here we have a liquid applied air barrier on the brick and IntelliMembrane at the ceiling. And then we did 3 inches of continuous rock wool insulation over the brick. And then an IntelliMembrane, which is a vapor variable membrane. And then 1 5/8 service cavity, which we put additional rock wool in the cavity. And then this is after our windows are installed. They're triple glazed tilt and turn windows from Icon Windows, aluminum. And then this is after the sheetrock was up. So this is my main wall assemblies. The main one was 3 inches of rock wool plus the 1 5/8 plus 1/2 inch sheetrock, but there's a few spots where we were really tight on space where we used 1.5 inches of polyiso unfaced instead of the 3 inches of rock wool, and then a few detailed spots where we only did the polyiso. Just a few details. We did polyiso at the corners to avoid thermal bridging at the party walls. We insulated the ends of the steel beams to avoid some thermal bridging there. And then just taping all of the plumbing penetrations. At the neighbors' walls, we just did the liquid applied air barrier and over the existing plaster. And there were some tricky taping conditions around the beams. So this is just showing the floor and ceiling where we insulated, and we were able to get, a lot of these buildings have, when they have a concrete slab, you get a big thermal bridge there, but here, because it was wood framing, we're able to get pretty good insulation all the way around. And we also did a lot of soundproofing. You know, we did a soundproofing underlayment at the floor and also sound isolation clips at the ceiling. So that combined with the air sealing and the insulation, the apartment is really quiet. And the neighbors below even noticed it during construction, like once that was installed, how much quieter it was with the construction noise. So the HVAC system is the Minotaur unit, which is a combined heating, cooling, and ventilation system. And the great thing about it for this type of project is no outdoor unit is needed. We just had to create 2 penetrations on the building. So the air intake is right here between these 2 windows, and the exhaust is here below the bathroom window. It was a little tricky figuring out where we could locate them, because we needed them to be 10 feet apart and 2 feet from a window. And based on where they worked out in the floor plan, we ended up doing them 1 high, 1 low. And that worked out pretty well. And we were able to get approval from the co-op for that. So here's the HVAC plan. So here you can see the intake and the exhaust coming, and then the unit, we were able to locate it over a closet, and most of the ductwork over the laundry room, because the ceilings are not particularly high in this apartment. So we really wanted to keep everything from lowering the ceiling. So we were able to centralize it and just have a few soffits. We ran it up between the joists above the kitchen. But the great thing about this system is you're basically compartmentalizing the apartment, and because you're sealed off from the neighbors and you have your own fresh filtered air, you avoid the transfer of smells and bugs and everything else. And most of these buildings this type of pre-war building has no mechanical ventilation whatsoever. To start out, the kitchens and bathrooms had windows, so there was really no ventilation previously other than opening a window. So in addition to the soundproofing, with more people working from home, the air quality is really a huge advantage to doing this. Here's some of the window details. So we wanted wood blocking anchoring into the existing brick, but I chose to locate it just at the attachment points for the clips instead of continuous, so that we could fill insulation all in between. And the typical windows on the building have aluminum panning as like a brick mold, and I put insulation inside of the panning as well so that the frame was insulated over the top of the frame. And then at the lintel, we used a little bit of aerogel batt insulation, because this is a real narrow point. You want to connect your interior insulation with the window. So that connection was pretty important. So here's showing we used the pressure treated wood blocking that was wrapped with waterproofing at the points of the clip attachments, and we cut those back later. And then we used some rigid insulation under the sill, but we used some little blocks of a Partel product that's a more dense product. We also used the Partel product for attaching the finishes, places where we need to screw in later. We used that instead of wood blocking. And then we used some waterproofing at the sill that was wrapped up later. This is showing how we insulated the panning. And here's the panning on the outside. And then the windows were taped to the interior air barrier on the inside, and they were also taped on the outside of the exterior brick. And this shows the little blocks of the Partel product for attaching the finishes, and all the other space was filled in with mineral wool or with the aerogel batt. So this was kind of a tricky corner. This was the existing window above, and you can see we replaced it with one large window to get a better view of that tree and better solar heat gain from the south in the winter. And it's nicely in the winter, and it's nicely shaded in the summer by that tree. But to get this corner to work, we had to use a thinner wall assembly. That's where I used some of the polyiso. And only step it back a little bit here in the corner. And then we also insulated the wall intersecting with the neighbor to avoid some thermal bridging at the corner. This is our blower door test. We hit pretty much on the first try. We hit 0.9 ACH50, which is below EnerFit. And that's tricky to do in such a small volume because it's 1,300 square feet and only a little less than 8.5 feet high. So it was thanks to a lot of patience that we hit the number. You can also see here the air barrier at the floor was the plywood subfloor, which we taped at the joints. So here's where we are now. We're just finishing up the project. And this is showing that view through to the big window of those trees and the view through the kids' bedroom. There. So that's it. Yeah, and just to summarize, a lot of the advantages of this are, you know, getting rid of the window AC units, getting off the steam heat, the air quality and the soundproofing. And in this particular building, the co-op owns a lot of the units that they rent out. So the idea is that this retrofit can serve as a model that can be repeated when the other units are vacated.
This is all my stuff that I took.
Thank you so much, Jane. That was really great. Such a good example of what can be done. We're going to turn it over to Sean to concierge general questions till the top of the hour. And then are you going to stick around with us for the after hour?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I also wanted to point out, I think Jordan Goldman joined us. Are you here, Jordan?
I am here simultaneously doing dinner and bedtime with my 2.5-year-old.
Yeah, so
So,
Jordan's
we are
my
on the verge
mechanic.
of shit show at any moment, so
Okay.
bear with me.
Yeah, so Jordan's here. He's my mechanical engineer. And I think Alex is here as well from Minotaur.
Yes, I do. Yes,
Yeah,
I
so
am
if
here.
there's like specific questions about the Minotaur system, Alex can answer those.
Was
Well,
it just-
Jane. Oh. All right, Jane, you got your support team, so let's get into it. We'll kick it off with Ken, who's got a couple questions. So Ken, fire away.
Yeah. Hi, Jane. Great presentation and wonderful project. My question is really about the support for the project of the neighbors and the building management, I guess, because you really are making some drastic changes, and we've done gut renovations of apartments before, but that's really amazing. And to see what must be a supportive building management. I'm wondering if they just went along, or do they want to see more of this?
So it actually, I mean, Jackson, my client, really spearheaded the project and was sort of the cheerleader for the approach. And actually, he told a little bit of the story last night in the after hours. So you guys can check that out in the recording, but I can give a brief summary. But basically, the apartment was in really bad shape. They unfortunately had to evict a previous person because of the conditions there. And so the co-op had to purchase the apartment, and Jackson was actually trying to convince the co-op to do the retrofit as the co-op and then sell the unit. And we were almost there. I did a little feasibility study letter explaining the approach, and but they weren't quite sold on it. So Jackson decided to purchase the apartment for himself and do the retrofit on the condition that the things that were in the feasibility study would be allowed. So including the exterior penetration. So that's kind of how it played out. But yeah, they were generally very supportive of the project, although maybe a little bit, skeptical if they were doing it for themselves. But the idea is that now that everyone sees it, and already some of the neighbors are, checking it out and are interested, and they notice the sound quality and all of that in the windows. So I think the idea is to really, do it as a model that other people are going to then want to repeat it.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Ken. Did you have another one, or will you wait?
No, that was
later?
kind of rolled up.
Okay.
I rolled
And
it up.
I'll make the same cheesy joke I made last night, is that Jackson's going to have the passive open house day soon enough once Mario wraps things up. So we're all invited. It's all free. Moving on, we got Zoe Kaufman had a question. You can see the
Okay.
There we go. Go for it.
Okay, we good? Sorry.
Yep.
All right. I'm wondering why the need to put like a liquid air barrier between apartments as opposed to, just drywall or something, because usually drywall is kind of what's used for compartmentalization. So was it just that was going to be your air barrier for testing in the blower door test?
Yeah, it's for the blower door test. And yeah, actually plaster in itself is usually okay as an air barrier. but due to the age and the condition, sometimes there's cracks, and there were some parts where, you know, the old partitions were removed, and just to make sure we were good for our blower door, we decided to just do the liquid on the party walls as well. But in cases where you have a more limited budget or other concerns, you can use the plaster as the air barrier if it's in good condition.
Got it. Thanks.
All right, moving along. Emily, you're next. Sorry, Emily Billheimer. You had a question unless I just copied your comment.
Oh, my question was answered
Oh, all right. Well, then we'll
about
keep
the
it going.
penetrations.
Okay, we'll keep
Right?
going. Well, do
The
you want to ask
building
me again?
improved them. Yes.
Okay. Moving along then, Jeff Rodin.
So it's an air barrier question. What was the product you used on the brick and the drywall, and was it the same product?
Yes, it was the same product. It was the Proseco Argard Cat 5. And I've used various products for liquid air barriers. I've used Stowe, Emerald Coat, 475 has a great product, Viscon. There's really a lot of products available. I picked the Proseco mostly because I liked the permeability of it, and you know, it was a little less expensive than some of the other ones, but there's quite a few products out there that work just as well.
And then one quick question is the corners where you added the ISO insulation. Was that, I mean, you did therm analysis and things like that to figure out the weak points on the thermal bridging?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do therm there on this project. I've done it in the past on the townhouse projects, and generally, you know, you want to insulate those corners at the party walls in about 2 feet to 2 to 4 feet is good practice.
Thumbs up here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And next, Ingrid Green has a couple questions.
I do. Great presentation there, Jane. I've loved every second. Those photos are killer. Love the photos. I think I put a question that was answered about Instagram, and for me, it was just raising an awareness kind of thing. Different audiences on different platforms. So great opportunity right there. I think, especially because of the stage that you're at, any stage is fine, but man, like hit Instagram, that'd be huge. Like, anyway, we'll see. On to the question. So the question is kind of like it segues into the Instagram awareness piece, in that I asked, do you lead a passive house design workshop for the architecture design school that you graduated from?
That would be a great idea. I mean, we just were talking the other night about how there's not enough training. I mean, there's lots of great training out there for Passivhaus, but that it's not happening in architecture schools as much as it could be in a lot of programs. So that's, yeah, definitely something that I'm interested in.
I don't even know if it's happening for the tradespeople as much. Even so, designers and tradespeople working together, I think is such an opportunity for a workshop for any college. I mean, that would just put you head and shoulders above if you, that aspect of working together and learning together, but having that respect factor in there. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think we're the heroes that we're waiting for. So I don't know. I think we just have to do more than we're doing already somehow. Anyway, that was it for me. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Ingrid.
Yeah, Ingrid, you hit it in the nail there. And I always say, like, everyone's here tonight will be teachers and educators in the upcoming years, because it's kind of how it works. Shannon from New Hope, you're next.
Thanks, Sean, and thank you, Jane, for a great presentation. It was fun to start seeing the mechanicals appear after last night. I'm wondering what you used to attach the air barrier at the floor to the interior and exterior walls, And also if you treated the end of the floor joist differently, much like you treated the end of the steel beam differently.
Yeah, so the air barrier of the floor to wall connection is just the Intello comes down and was taped to the plywood. And then the plywood is our air barrier at the floor, the plywood subfloor. And we taped all the plywood joints. So that worked pretty well. We didn't, I mean, in one direction, the joists were running parallel to the brick wall. I can share that detail again, would probably be the easiest.
Yeah, thank you. I saw that one. That was parallel. Did you, I noticed the insulation between the floor joists when it was perpendicular to an exterior wall. Did you change the insulation or do any special wrapping at the pockets?
Let me just go to that photo. I'm just going to share the screen again real quick. Can you guys see that again? Yeah, along here it was parallel, and then the joists actually changed direction, and they're parallel here as well.
Yeah, okay.
So I didn't have any joist ends intersecting the exterior wall. But even if I, right, yeah, there were no joist ends here. And but
Jane, from an air sealing perspective, all the joists are outside of your air barrier.
Right, that's what I was just gonna say, yeah, because here's our air barrier at the floor and then the Intel at the wall and at the ceiling. It's not really like, it's not like a townhouse where you have that issue.
Yeah.
It's really, it's this inside space here that's sealed, so.
Perfect, thank you so much for explaining that.
Right, because at a townhouse, we would normally move this first joist inward so that we could have insulation there. And then all the party wall joists would have to be taped individually.
Thanks.
Thanks, Shannon. And there was one for Alex, Scott Stewart.
Yeah, we're not really that familiar with the Minotaur and the systems like that. We don't really have them available in Oz at the moment. So a little while ago, the PHPP data for in a Passivhaus Institute Passivhaus, the efficiencies weren't able to be used. Is that being rectified? And do you guys have PHPP data for the system?
Good. Well, hello to you, Scott. So can you tell me where you're located, just for me to have a better understanding to who I'm speaking with?
Yeah, so I'm in Woolgoolga, Australia, which is about halfway between Brisbane and Sydney.
Hello to friends of the Commonwealth. So to answer your question, so we are having active discussions with PHI because of the uniqueness of our unit, as we are using, a heat pump based machine to do, to capture, the heat not only of the stale air, but also the heat of the moisture and also the work of the compressor. So 3 heat sources. So we're doing active heat recovery, and PHPP is not designed as we speak to take that into consideration in a fair way. Okay, so it's a bit more complicated than anticipated. I stay confident that in the upcoming months it will be resolved. I've got good confidence that we will find a way. Yeah, so for now, no, we don't have a good way to show you in the PHPP how to correctly and fairly and logically include our units. Okay, but it's a question of time.
Yeah, because I actually tried using some of the, well, I was speaking with another consultant a little while ago, and we basically decided, well, we could just put in 0. And in Australia, building Passivhaus is cheating, really, because we're doing some in Sydney with a 90mm stud frame, and that's all the insulation we need. So, and for a bunch of our projects, you can actually get away with 0 efficiency on the system. The big thing, I guess the certification is one thing, but actually using the buildings another. So anything north of Sydney along the coast we have a dehumidification issue. So and it continues through into winter. So where we are on the coast, this morning it was 12 degrees and 100% humidity, and it's probably about 80% and 16 degrees outside at the moment. So we're still bringing wet air into the house, and we have to get rid of it. So it's a really, to actually have, well, it's not a magic bullet, I suppose, but actually have that system that can plug into particularly small systems that we don't have to run an extra dehumidifier and another cooling coil and a whole bunch of other things would be really useful. So yeah, keep us posted. It's really good tech.
Yeah, well, thank you for your kind words. And yeah, and we call those units all-in-one HVAC units because this is what they do. And our service is called Pentacare because they take care of 5 things, which is fresh air, heating, cooling, dehumidification, and medical grade HEPA 15 filtration, which is F9, you know, in European or international standard. So as standard, you know, which is capable of capturing 90% of the wildfire smoke particle. This is why we're getting more and more popular on the West Coast in the US and Canada, because unfortunately in the last 2-3 years, you know, wildfires are more predominant than they used to be. But we're planning to be available in the upcoming, I would say 18 months, probably between a year or 2 from now with new machines, you know, for the rest of the world, actually. You know, and definitely Australia, New Zealand is part of the countries where I would like to see our company grow our markets. That's for sure. You know, being from Canada, you know, well, like I said, the Commonwealth. You know, I mean, we have natural ties with you guys down there. You know, and you're good beer drinkers, just like us up here in Quebec. You know, so we're going to go along well.
Yeah, well, we just did a design for a brewery just recently. But if you need to do a pilot project to test it out in Australia, we've got a bunch of small projects that would be really suitable for. So keep us posted.
Well, I mean, and if I remember correctly, your electricity is 220 volt, 50 years. Is that correct? Yeah, yeah. So and yeah, everything's possible. And yeah, we might let's keep the channel open, you know, and I'll be more than happy to reach out to you and see what we can do in the short term. But thank you for your interest, Scott. Well,
yeah, thanks very much. Cheers. Thanks, Sean.
Hey, no worries. Great questions, great conversations. And again, we're here to create collaboration. So this is how we're going to make this thing grow. All right, Zach, let's throw us back in some breakout rooms.
Yeah, awesome. So we're going to go into breakout rooms for 7 minutes. So we have a little more time this time, just a little bit. So this is this will be new people. So please introduce yourself and maybe share some thoughts about what we just learned from Jane. So see you in a bit. All right, everyone's back. I hope that was fun. I'm gonna do some really important thank yous, and then we'll get back into the happy hour. And I have a couple of announcements as well. So here we go. So first off, none of this work that we do at the Accelerator would happen were it not for the support of these fine organizations. These are groups that have common cause and common purpose with Passivhaus Accelerator and provide the support that makes us survive and thrive. So big thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Hvc Architects, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minitaire, thanks Alex for being here tonight, RDH Building Science, Rockwool North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Our champion sponsor is SIGA, and our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA. Thanks also to our patron sponsors, AeroBarrier, BR+A Consulting Engineers, Brennan Airtightness and Insulation, Innotech Windows and Doors, and US Engineered Wood T-Stud.
Just seeing if Prudence wanted to say any final words, but I don't see her. All right, well, if you have to leave, we're going to get things turned over to the happy hour. For those that are across the pond, it might be early to start the happy hour, but you know, we'll just keep doing it here because the rest of us here in North America are moving to appropriate times to have an happy hour. Thank you everyone very much for joining us. Again, if you have to leave, you can go. Hopefully we'll see you soon. And if you do come back, we do ask you to bring a friend. And of course, we say friend with a PH. So good morning, good day, good afternoon. Otherwise, we're going to continue with the happy hour. If you have any questions for Jane, let me know. I think we got through them prior to the breaker room. But if I missed one, raise your hand or chime in and I'll try to manage the manage them. Any questions for Jane? I think Jordan left, so I don't think he can chime in. I think he's putting kids to bed. So if there's any mechanical questions, we can either defer it to Jane, and then she can always just say it depends, and then we can figure out how to answer it appropriately. If you have any questions for Alex, I see his smiley face. There we are. Jane, any other insights to the project you want to share? Anything between Jackson and yourself that came out that you're looking forward to, either the next one or maybe just talk about what's where the project is at for moving forward? Sorry, just before we do that, Lindsay's asked a question. So Lindsay, why don't you chime in first?
Thank you very much, Jane. I really enjoyed the presentation last night too. And I just wondered, I know Tim McDonald also used the Minotaur, which is always a great vote of confidence, but did you consider any other units? And if so, could you tell us about that?
Well, we're actually I can tie together both questions. We're looking at Jackson currently lives in the apartment upstairs, and he's going to be moving into this unit and then selling that unit. But we're looking at maybe doing some small retrofits to that apartment, and one of them is getting rid of the window AC units. And we're looking at this unit called the Apaca HPAC 2.0, which is also a self-contained heat pump that you can, and there's a component you can add ventilation, but it's a unit that just sits below the window with a through wall open, it's directly through the wall, but needs smaller openings in the wall than a through wall AC unit. And that's a solution that can be done where you're not doing the full gut with all the ductwork. I'm looking at using that on a project on the Upper West Side also, where they have existing through wall AC units. So there's already openings in the masonry. So yeah, and we couldn't do, typical mini splits in this case because there really was nowhere to put the outdoor unit. So the Minotaur was just, and also it's a, relatively small space. So the Minotaur was just the best option that could provide everything in one package.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking so much about how to do apartments, and you've got on the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side, and the buildings are not nearly ready to turn over. So if you want to live in a comfortable apartment, what you're doing is what somebody needs to do.
Yeah, but I'm definitely interested in coming up with approaches that, for people that aren't able to do the full solution, finding how can you get as close as possible, without doing the full thing. So yeah, it's because if we're going to get there, there's got to be many different ways of getting there to do these retrofits. So from whole building retrofits to, bits and pieces here and there, every bit helps.
Many of the apartments on Upper East and Upper West Sides will have the back side where you've got the laundry and you've got less visible and not landmarked areas. So, you can often, if you're lucky enough to have an apartment that used to have a kitchen hood or a laundry, you could potentially get it back there.
Right. Yeah, I'm working on one building on the Upper West Side that's a whole, it's like 9 townhouses that were put together into one multifamily building. And they have through wall AC units all over the place, both in the historic masonry and in the rear facade. And they're, and they're only going to be able to do things phased one step at a time. They can't really do the whole thing all at once, but we're looking at a multi-phase project where we're going to insulate the roof in one project and deal with the skylights. In another project, potentially insulate on the back facade, with exterior insulation. On the front facade, maybe do the through wall units in the old through wall AC slots. But back facades of buildings in New York City, like when you're in a landmark district, like finding ways to do things in the back facade. And maybe it means doing something different for the people facing the front or but
well, some of the bigger apartments will have them both the front and the back. So you could potentially use the back to get your outside air.
Right.
But I can say congratulations, and they're lucky to have you.
Thanks. Yeah, and then there's also a lot of people doing, solutions if they can find a way, a common shaft way, to run
Right.
refrigerant lines. If you really can't penetrate the facade and you need to put units on the roof.
Well, I was thinking that if New York City is now allowing 8 inches, if you cannot see some of these back sides of buildings, then why not build out 8 inches on them and then run all your utilities in those 4 inches and put your insulation on the outside 4 inches, and you've done a huge favor to the city.
Yeah, we basically need to find all of these approaches and tackle one building at a time.
Thanks.
Yeah, and it's again great to have these different opportunities, Jane, and be able to have like a full retrofit and then figure out what's the next phase. So great stuff. Thanks, Lindsay. And heading over to Shannon, who's next in the queue.
Thanks, Sean. I'm really curious to hear from you and Jackson how you did the feasibility study, kind of what you put together to be compelling and try to convince the co-op to renovate to PH, to buy it and renovate to PH. And I remember you saying that they didn't go for it, and Jackson, in his infinite wisdom, purchased it and went for it, which we all applaud. And so what would you do differently next? Like, what do you think convinced them? What was a strong part of the feasibility study? What might you have added after having that experience? And then what will you do to monitor this, to convince them to do the next ones that are coming up for lease?
Right. I was going to say what we can really do now is do some monitoring and testing to compare this apartment with the neighbors. And it's a great opportunity to do that. Take just on a noisy night, take some sound readings in the typical apartment and in this one, or, do some air quality sampling and just really show the benefits. Because I don't think a lot of people aren't going to be convinced to do this just for the energy savings alone. But if you show them how much quieter the apartment is, how much less dust you have, how your air quality is so much better, how you're not getting your neighbors' cooking fumes. And after COVID, people are, more sensitive about air quality and all of those issues. So, you really have to sell it on the benefits as well as the energy efficiency.
Jane, and just because Jackson's there, I think we should all unmute and first give you a huge clap for this project. So let's all give you the praise you so deserve. And then there's Jackson. Jackson, we're going to give you huge praises because again, every high performance project needs a high performance client. And so I don't think we touched on it last night, but were there, you're going to get the Aware to look at the indoor air quality, but was there any other monitoring systems that you were going to either get as a gift or purchase?
Yeah, I'm actually hoping to put a moisture sensor in the wall too, maybe under where it can be accessed through a kitchen cabinet hidden or something else, so that we can, show that, track just that there's not moisture issues in the wall over time. But yeah, also
cabinets going up in the next couple of days.
And I know again, Jackson, as we're all looking forward to the wintertime, you can take the thermal imaging camera picture of your unit, and like even that again, if you kind of replicate the corner that Jane had on our, I think our second slide, and that would look like a good picture. And as we teased last night, for all the I've seen that New York photo that Sam took, we need more of those thermal imaging pictures of the brownstone.
It was my camera.
Kevin, we'll never give you credit for it. It'll always be Sam's. I don't know what it is.
We actually just got a camera for our office, so I'm hoping to do some photos of my house, this project, a bunch of other ones, because it's a great way to show it to people.
We can have a thermal photo competition to see who can take the best one. All are welcome. Come on by.
Perfect.
And yeah, we also do have an energy monitor, a Sense with the extra coupling. So we'll be directly monitoring the HVAC energy performance as well, energy usage, as well as the whole apartment.
Very cool. Derek, did I see that you had a question, or was that a comment? Over to our main man, Derek in China.
Oh, yeah, sorry. It was a question because I was noticing that Jane was using her experience in kind of saying in certain areas she applied certain tapes and other solutions, but wasn't doing all of the calculations. And sometimes, it becomes a point of diminishing returns for some of these savings and such. And it does take some experience because, as we know in the HVAC industry, the problem with people using rule of thumb and stuff like that is that they were completely oversizing for passive house units. So there's definitely, you can't go too far away from the calculations, but at the same point, where is the balance? I mean, you seem to be striking a good solution for that.
Yeah, so I mean, we did a PHPP model for this, even though it's technically not certifiable and there's no certification standard for an individual unit, but that was really the tool we used to make sure that the system, the Minotaur system, was adequate for this space.
Yeah, and like the tapes and things, at some point you have to say, okay, I've done this in 4 other locations, and we know that we need to go, 2 feet or 4 feet or whatever it is. That was your comments that you were making. That.
Oh, okay. So you mean the insulation of the corners, the thermal bridging, right? Yeah. So I mean, we did the overall PHPP, but we didn't calculate every single thermal bridge. Yeah, because there are certain guidelines that will work once you've tested it. So yeah.
Right. I think that's the kind of experience that was another attendee was talking about. Getting you to teach and coach in these areas, and I think. That's the kind of thing that people who have a lot of experience can lend to say, like, okay, here's the math, and this is what you need to learn to do the analysis properly. But at this point is when you can start to, estimate based on your experience, and that's more art than science,
Right. Yeah. And we're also interested, once enough of these have been done and it's been tested, in developing standards that can be guidelines. So like for example, that a co-op building can put in their alteration agreement that when someone renovates, they're required to put, this thickness of insulation and this type of air barrier and all of that. I mean, you still need to look at each building individually to make sure there's no like all-in-one solution. For example, if you have a building that has particularly absorptive brick, you're not going to want to, you're going to want to be more careful about how much you're insulating and things like that. So you can come up with standards, but you still have to be particular because every building is a little bit different.
The codes, sorry to string on another question here, but the codes have been a major issue. Codes have been holding back, the evolution of product, or evolution of success, I'm going to call it. And it seems like, you just gave another example of where, like, if we just had an overall performance requirement, per square foot per occupant kind of thing, and then a little bit of metrics that can determine, for the policymakers that, yes, this is successful. That's kind of what's going on here. I live most of my time here in Shenzhen, and, there's a lot of people. And there's a lot of construction. And so they're being pretty smart about how they're assigning policies so that they're not trying to make them so narrow and defined that, if a new technology comes along, it's like, oh, now we got to change the policy, because their policies here, they can change them very quickly, but they don't like to. They're pretty good about saying this is a 10-year policy.
Right.
So
I mean, go ahead. I was going to say New York City. Sorry, this is an interruption.
Go ahead.
New York City has been, really on the cutting edge kind of in terms of establishing these new codes. I mean, the 2020 Energy Code is more strict than New York State, and there's several ways to get there. There's the prescriptive path or the performance path, and then the local law 97, which I don't know if everyone here is familiar with it, but that buildings over a certain size in New York City have to meet certain energy targets by 2024 and 2030. And it's based on how much energy you use, not how you get there. So, you know, it's based on benchmarking and how much energy buildings are actually using. So you can use all different paths. There's no like prescription of how you need to do it, whether it's insulation or windows. And you can do it through what needs to be replaced on your building. Like there's no reason to, you know, rip out windows and redo necessarily if that's not the next step for your building. Like, whereas if your roof's in bad shape, now is the time to insulate.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. I mean, that's really glad to hear, and I'll make sure that I reverberate what you just said to as many other jurisdictions as possible, because that's the kind of simple, you know, leadership that we need on policies that'll help move everything forward. You can't spend your way out of reducing resources. You just have to be smarter about it. Thank you so much, by the way. I loved all the photos in the presentation.
Thanks, Derek. I just have to go up here. Sorry, Kevin Brown had a comment and then question, or maybe a question and a comment. So Kevin, I'll let you come on.
Hey, thanks. Jackson, what do you think? I think I heard Jane in passing saying that there was one other unit in the building that you're working on, or is that another building? And Jackson, what's the response of the neighbors just so far? And what do you think the chances are of triggering this to more of the same? I mean, you're leading the charge. You've got the thin edge of the wedge, right? So.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, so the situation is we live in the building currently, and we'll be moving into the Passivhaus unit. So then we have this question of what to do with our current unit, which we'll be selling. It's relatively recently renovated, so we won't be doing this project again. It wouldn't be appropriate. So we're looking at what we could do with like a Windows plus HVAC retrofit to try to get a significant increase in performance and as many of the benefits as possible. Come up with the best window detail for the best ceiling. See what else can be done, and see what kind of performance can be squeezed out by ditching the building steam system, ditching window AC, replace it with one of these new self-contained heat pump units where you penetrate the exterior at each location. So we would put one in each major room, probably 4 of them instead of the one military unit, as an example of a sort of alternate lighter retrofit approach to continue to improve the envelope, get the benefits of the windows and HVAC. So that was the other project that we were referencing. And there are already 2 neighbors who have expressed interest in doing something like that. The window ACs are a real pain point. It gets really hot in the city. They don't work that well. They're terrible then in the winter. You have to either figure out how to protect them, which is really difficult, or you're lugging them in and out and up and down, which is a real chore. So that's pretty appealing. And then the noise factor, street noise is very different. And that's something that people will really notice coming into the new Passivhaus apartment versus their units. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the key selling points are. I think the noise and ditching the window AC, the steam heat system in the building is also terrible. The temperature swings are huge. It's like 20 plus degrees up Fahrenheit when it turns on, kicks on, then it'll go off, and the temperature plunges down into the 50s. You know, depending on where you are in the building, you just get this really uncomfortable experience through the winter. So yeah, we'll see what really catches hold, but there are a bunch of quality of life benefits that could be real selling points here. The odor, some people hate, you know, that when their neighbor cooks fish stew once a week and you can smell it. Could be different things for different people, I suppose.
I wonder if the former tenant wasn't just a stealth operative, you know?
Yeah, that's kind of a long and somewhat sad story, actually. But the gut renovation was absolutely necessary, and gut renos, and of course new construction is a total no-brainer for passive house principles. So that's why we had to make it happen.
Yeah, interesting, Jackson, and I appreciate the fact that you're again, you're cognizant of the materials that went into the renovation in your current spot and saying, hey, like it's been renovated, we don't need to renovate it again. Like you might need it, might need the extra insulation in some period of time down the road, but right now it's, the current stuff there is what it is, and we'll focus on the window. So I think that's a good point of being cognizant of.
Right.
John, can I ask the group something? We were just talking a lot about sound sensing, and I think I've leaked a little bit of what we're doing. We've got a light switch that has temperature and humidity, CO2, but I'm wondering if we should add a pack for non-invasive sound. The other one that Jane mentioned was in-wall moisture detection. So it would be possible to make an additional lead set to have an in-wall sensor added in certain strategic locations. And we put these, again, this is all inside of our light switch because our light switches don't actually switch power. It just controls the light. So is that something that's like really attractive, more than 50%? You would want to see in something that was, obviously very cost effective. So sound sensing and then a moisture, in-wall moisture sensor.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely need good systems for monitoring and something that's inexpensive and can tell you lots of things would be really useful.
Yeah, I've hit that point, but what about the addition of the sound sensing? So it's ambient, it would be ambient sound levels. So we can record obviously the CO2, humidity, temperature, but the ability to have an ambient sound and spectral sound also, so you can determine, it's not to eavesdrop on people. In other words, it doesn't provide any audio. It's just simply SPL, sound pressure level, so it's detecting
level.
like,
yeah.
Yeah. So you could actually determine street sound from the sensors on the inside. So you could determine like how much is permeating from walls because that comes through at a much lower frequency. You could determine what was coming through windows, that's a different frequency, and then you could determine what's in the room because of the higher frequency overtones. So we can provide that data in addition to the other sensor packs. And again, we can do this at a tiny cost too because it's already embedded in the existing system of that what came along with the light. So, but the specific question was there's two things. You mentioned the in-wall moisture detection,
right,
and the sound. So from everybody on the call, who would like to see something like that? And is it kind of like, meh? Is it, yeah, I really want?
Yeah, I guess the sound thing is more something it's nice to test it to kind of prove it to people, but it's not necessarily something you would need to continually monitor. Whereas the moisture and temperature and humidity, it's really helpful to track it over time and see how it changes in the seasons and see how it might be different in a south-facing room versus an east-facing room, things like that.
Yeah, we use those things for detecting mechanical equipment failures. So even though it's a passive house, it's mechanical system failures that causes the biggest problem. And when they do fail, whether it's a minor problem or filter clogging or whatever, it's actually a major issue. So it's actually imperative to, we have this little tagline I started here on Passivhaus Accelerator. It's just a little active in your passive. But okay, so I think what I'll do is I'll make something like the sensor an option that can be added or even removed at a later point. So it's just done when you're the first year of construction, maybe something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks everybody.
Yeah, Derek, I know Richard said yes, and if anyone else is looking for some more insights or info with Derek, just send him a message and carry on that conversation. Just going to go to the queue here. We now got a bunch. So Eric, you had a question?
Yeah, sorry. My question was about reach codes, and I think I just need a little very quick tutorial. I understand what they are. They're sort of codes that aren't really law or required to complete. And I just wanted to understand, let's say from a multi-state national perspective, do either municipalities individually adopt these reach codes so as to, push their implementation? I mean, what's the role of reach codes other than being aspirational?
Yeah, I mean, they are aspirational, but sometimes they then become the code. Like, for example, New York State has their energy code, and then they had what was called a stretch code, which was similar to what you're describing. And then New York City decided to adopt the stretch code as their code, so that New York City code is actually more strict than New York State. Yeah, so they are essentially aspirational, but then the goal is that they eventually become the code, and that the codes over time become more strict.
Well, is there a carrot ever dangled for that, as opposed to a stick? The stick is making it code, right? Is there a carrot where, yeah, here's code, but if you do this, thing, you get some money, or you get an incentive, or you get your face on the front of Forbes, or I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at least in New York City, there's no money to give out, so they don't. But they are going to impose fines for people who don't meet the standards. So, that's, I guess we have the stick, but not the carrot in New York City.
Isn't the carrot just not being the stick?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But the carrot is also just the benefits that you get from it all.
That doesn't
Can I
count.
chime in here?
Sure.
Massachusetts does a lot of that, actually, trying to incentivize higher performance.
Yeah, so being from outside Boston, we have what's called our stretch energy code, which is a optional variant for municipalities to vote in. Once they vote it in, it becomes the code for that town. Okay, so that's the stick approach. The carrot approach, which we also have here, is that there's a series of incentives for Passivhaus, which is, I was just researching this today, $5,000 for a feasibility study. And just to tell the developer, give us your current assumptions, we'll tell you how close you are. And it's paid for by the state. Like, now we're in Massachusetts, so we do that kind of stuff, but it's unusual. But that's two approaches. They both work, and happy they're both here.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Good points, everybody. Gonna move on. Barbara.
Thank you. I had a question for Jackson, because I have lived in apartment buildings with steam heating, and the steam coming up through the pipes at about 5:30 in the morning bangs. It's incredibly loud as it's coming in and probably going out. I don't know. I just wondered if the insulation that was put into his apartment, I presume the steam heating has been taken out because it's now pH.
Yeah.
Can he hear the steam pipes knocking in everybody else's apartments?
Yeah, so knocking is a function of the condition of the system and the slope of the pipes. Maybe more of an issue in smaller buildings, not sure. But our system actually doesn't have much of a problem in knocking. If
You're
we
lucky
did,
then.
yeah, we're definitely lucky. If we did, we would certainly get some benefits, because we do have a lot of soundproofing and insulation, which we notice in other ways.
Okay, cool. And just back to the last question, Eric's question. Building code in Australia is, as I just put in the chat, absolute minimum standard of what you have to produce. When you build a house, you have to have, I'm in Canberra, so the Australian Capital Territory, you have to have an ACT building certifier come onto your site, discuss the plans, look at it, check the building as it's going up, and make sure that it meets the national code and the ACT code. There are two codes that apply. But those codes, they achieve NASERS 6, like 6-star rating. And NASERS is, it's on paper. the architect designs it, whether it gets built to the design or it's more leaky or whatever, as long as it's built to the design, even if it's not finished the way you'd finish a passive house, it'll still pass. So it's, yeah, it's not aspirational at all, sadly. And it takes years to revise the code. With any luck, it's being revised now, but it's not going to be revised to Passive House. It's maybe going to be revised to Nather's 7 stars. Not a lot.
And Barbara, are they mandating any blower door tests, or is it still just
No, not yet.
Build a sieve? All right.
It's yeah, that's it. Sadly.
Keep
That
building
sounds
cabinets.
like the Vermont story.
Yeah, so you said, Enrique. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's sad, but there you go.
I've got a great announcement about the Canadian Code. The National Building Code 2020 is due to be released sometime the fall of 2021.
Nice.
Beautiful progress in codes.
Is it going to come up to Passive House?
Oh God, no, not even close. They're
Oh.
they're still arguing about whether even to include airtightness in it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so that was irony. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only, I mean,
So
the only,
Thank you.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I'm in Canada too, and yeah, it's a shame to see that for a country where in the 70s our building science research did did help the creation of Passivhaus, to see that our national building codes are lagging. I'm not proud of that, you know. But anyhow, we're going forward slowly but surely. But luckily, there are people like us, all of us, pushing in the right direction, working together, encouraging each other, you know, to build better. And the more we talk, the more we spread the words around, you know, the better and the faster we'll get to the right place, which is, you know, to build across the globe using Passive House building standard, because it is all of us here tonight. We know that it is the building code of the future. The question is, when is it going to be mainstream? Okay, and we are all missionaries on that. It's a noble mission we have. You know, us military, we do a little part. You know, and our mission is to take care of indoor wellness. You know, but there's the envelope, and all the rest. You know, it's a team effort. So we are all missionaries about building better. And I'm the son of a builder. Where in '65, my dad put, you know, behind reclaimed wood planks from a barn in the living room, aluminum foil in 1965. So we try to push my family building better and wiser. And we know better. It's 2021. So let's be missionaries, like you know, we're believers, you know, and we're helping our people all across the globe. So amen.
Well, good time to get on a soapbox, and absolutely, Alex.
Hallelujah.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
All right, Mr. PH Molnar, you get to follow up after that enthusiastic outburst by, not outburst, a positive note by Alex. So, Mr. PH. Peter, this is unlike you to have problems finding your mute button.
Oh, I found the chat list button. I'm sorry. There we go. That for Jackson, approaching any other units that are available in the building for complete demolition and tear out interfit. It's a big project, but you're going to convince the board it's a better idea?
Sorry, I didn't catch the beginning.
Okay.
Are you talking about owner-occupied units, or this building has rental units owned by the co-op, which is unusual and a prime target as well?
Are you going to approach any that go vacant and do the same kind of a project, or is that too ambitious?
Financial resources permitting, I would do every one. I would like to sell one. If we didn't want to live in it so badly, you know, it might be better to sell it and sort of show that it's worth it financially as well. So that could be a reason to do one more to try to get it on the market.
Yeah. No, it's an admirable project to put such a comfortable building project in that big apartment building.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. The playbooks that just came out for retrofitting all the major building typologies in New York City lined up quite well actually with what we just did, recommending individual ventilation, effectively sort of retrofit compartmentalization. And yeah, with a gut renovation, the ducted solution worked well with the Minutair unit. Doing something without ducting could also be an option, especially for lighter retrofits. But yeah, we do need to get over the phobia of penetrating the exterior of buildings. That's a major barrier.
Right.
And it's typically viewed as a major no-no. And so I think that is an area where, between the city and NYSERDA with the climate goals we have, I think that should become actively supported, destigmatized, and for health reasons also. I mean, air quality is just so bad, and these buildings have zero ventilation.
So hang on,
it's such a big opportunity to improve it.
Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there at the end. It's funny because I was thinking about this, that the equipment of yesteryear, right? The Victorian radiators, the air ducts in these whatever arts and craft like Edwardian homes, there was time in it, and you see these really nice like brass vents and that sort of thing, and now it's just become so utilitarian. And if you look at like a mini split ductless system, it's just like this white box with like vaguely rounded corners, like there's no art in it. So that could be an opportunity, you know what I'm saying? Like you could convince a building, especially if it's a period building, it's Art Deco or Beaux-Arts or whatever, that you could have penetrations, but they're actually points of interest if you kick it up a notch. So I actually have an example. Give me a second.
I think it's a very interesting comment, and bring this.
Can you see that? So I made this vent guard on a laser cutter, and it's held on with magnets. So this is, I mean, my crummy 1980s, duct system, but it's just, imagine this on Fifth Avenue. People would be like, oh, isn't that nice? And really it's 21st century technology.
Yeah, I mean, it really shouldn't be a big deal to, throw a couple louvers. And in fact, there are a bunch of really shoddy, oversized penetrations from these through-wall AC units that became a thing for a while. So these are smaller, carefully done, insulated, proper. So yeah, it shouldn't be a problem, but there's a major perception problem that needs to be overcome, especially with co-op ports. So it was important as a buyer of this unit that we got it pre-approved. We wrote it into our purchase contract that we would be able to perform the work in accordance with the feasibility study, because it's the kind of thing where they could so easily get cold feet and say, yeah, no, sorry, no penetrations.
Yeah, and that building is not in a landmark district, so dealing with this in the buildings that are in landmark districts is going to be a huge challenge.
Just put one of those neon signs that says like "We buy gold." They'll love that. That little hole in the 6-inch hole in the wall would be nothing compared to that.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, they're doing it in Europe. So we are definitely able to do that in North America. To do great retrofits to historical buildings. Yeah, and Prescott, I think that you're bringing a very valid point. We have to keep in mind that in the building industry, unless you're doing your part or the high-end / architectural world, people are not willing to pay for beautiful things, unfortunately. Okay, I think that form can follow the function, and I think it could be interesting and nice to look at, you know, as much as my father was a builder, my mom was an interior designer. So I love design, interior design, industrial design, architecture, and yeah, and I would love to see one day effective, but nicely looking, you know, outdoors. They do exist, by the way. There are some which are interesting, you know, and yeah, but I think that we are able to do stuff useful and good looking at the same time. You know, I vouch for that. That's for sure. So, especially if it's something that you have to look, not to have to look at every day, but you know that you could have a look at. You know, yeah.
No, good stuff, Prescott, and thanks for showing us that item. Hey, if you're gonna pitch a project, or sorry, pitch a product to a clientele, well, we're here. So
yeah,
good on you.
Hey, if you can make the shower drain look like the tile, why can't you make the vent look like a brick?
Totally.
You know what I'm saying?
I hear you.
Yeah,
because you need to maintain the integrity of the materials.
Yeah,
No, I think it would be cool if you cut real wood. I don't know.
Like an actual brick.
I actually thought about faux painting, you know, getting a faux painter to paint the grill to blend into the brick better. And part of me wanted to go with that approach, but part of me wanted, you know, you're not going to have this, you're not going to hire a faux painter for every project. You know, we wanted to make this affordable and accessible and so not too precious so that it can be repeated. So, you know, decided to nix that idea, but I feel like it blended in with the facade pretty well in spite of that.
I feel like it's kind of like light switches or something. You can try so hard to make a better looking light switch or like a fancier looking light switch, but at the end of the day, it's going to look like dated in 5 years, or it's not going to be this person's taste or whatever. So I feel like with stuff like that, sometimes plain is just, but I do think your laser cutting thing's pretty cool, especially if it was like a real piece of like nice wood and it was built into like the baseboard. I don't know. It is pretty cool.
You know, Joe Stebrook made the point in a presentation that it depends on your perspective, and that are you trying to preserve the brick, or are you trying to preserve the building? And so if the improvement is focused on the building through, you know, appropriate drying, you know, vapor control, then you're preserving the building. And it's one of those geeky kind of look at it, but it's I loved it.
If you pulled out the bricks and instead of mortar, if you put in the plastic corrugated bug screens that we use in between, you know, the bottom of the outside of the building and the whatever your air barrier
or something.
Yeah,
just put a plenum on the backside. And you could just be sucking in through you know, you need it to be like 4 times the size, but you could just create a big area where the actual mortar wasn't there, and that could be your intake. So you could reuse the existing bricks.
Yeah, this building actually has pretty fat mortar joints, so I could almost picture that.
It's gangster.
But yeah, you would need to increase the size so much to get the free area that you need that it's a little bit.
And it's structural, so I'm sure your structural engineer would have.
Right, you would need, then you would need to create a larger opening with a lintel. You know, it gets into a whole thing, but it's interesting as a concept.
Interesting that the group went on a whole like mechanical louver direction tonight, and typically we go down the, you know, induction stoves and laundry units, which we haven't done in a few months. So, and we're not starting now because we're about to wrap up, but typically that's where we end up going. Peter, any other comments? Are you good? All right. Well, I think maybe we should wrap up a little early. I can appreciate Jane and Jackson staying on 2 full nights. Man, 4 solid hours of this project. I think we got it all. So I think we should give you some huge praise for your time and your efforts. Because again, this is one of those ones we're gonna copy and paste in a whole bunch of units. So thanks for inspiring us, both of you. And Jackson, when it comes to, I haven't had a chance to find it, and so I'll figure out how to email you, but in Vancouver, there is a Passivhaus that is for sale, and there's only really been about 2 single family homes on the market, and we also have a multifamily project that's on the market. I'll send you the marketing material so you can tell your real estate agent to kind of copy and paste some of these words. And then of course you have the Accelerator's benefit page. So within that language, hopefully there's enough marketing info to give you a bit of an extra boost for your investment into this. So
Yeah, it's a little bit of a counterintuitive problem with Passivhaus. They're so wonderful to live in that nobody ever wants to sell. So we don't get any comps.
yeah, I mean, the most part in Vancouver is people have built them for themselves, and so they're just not on the market. But this one was actually a bit of a spec where they did keep it for the year, and so I guess the owners, did it, built it, and kept it for a year to deal with the capital gains taxes, and so. But now it's on the market. So yeah, anybody want to come to Vancouver and buy a $4.2 million Passivhaus? Come on over. Come hang out with me.
Yeah, one of my past clients was actually a small developer, one of my townhouse retrofits, and it was a small 2-story townhouse in Brooklyn. And they rented it for 2 years and then sold it. And when they were renting it, they put it on the market for $8,000 a month. And I thought they were insane. And they had a tenant after the first open house. And then when they sold it, they had 3 buyers after the first open house. And
That's really cool.
It sold over asking. So yeah, it was
Crazy.
interesting to see. And it sold, it was before COVID, but it definitely was a huge selling point.
Yeah, we get more of these on the market, then people will see the value, and then we can help drive things. So yes, Shannon, you complete. I've already had conversations with the realtors here in Vancouver, and again, some of them they're not there yet, but every day we do your best. Just keep teaching everybody. I thought I saw a hand up, but otherwise, yeah, Prescott, you saying goodnight? Okay, well, let's wrap it up. Thanks, everyone. We'll, again, tomorrow night, sorry, I've just seen the last bunch of comments coming in. But yeah, we'll see tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon for the product spotlight with Stowe. And then next week's a bit of a big week. We have construction tech, the happy hour, and then the event with Johnny. I look forward to that. So if we don't see you tomorrow, see you soon, everybody. And if you come back, bring a friend. We got to get this scaled up faster. So talk to you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
Take care.
Take care. Derek, you still need help with the program?
Oh,
You still need help with the programming stuff? I mean, we touch base like, yeah, we should hop on a call.
Absolutely. It's funny. I was just finishing up the draft of the email yesterday, going out to like 5 of the different dealers that have been writing their own code for interfaces and stuff. But yeah, we're right at the finish line on that app. And with the new stuff coming out now, where we have the communicating modules, that's how we're doing the IAQ sensors and stuff. So, I mean, it's all stuff that's been in the roadmap for years. But yeah, I just need a tiny bit of help. Let me get your email again here.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah, throw it in the chat.
Throw it in the channel?
Just
Oh yeah, throw it in the chat, but don't delete it yet. Zach is
There you go.
I think he's gonna try and.
There you go, Derek. Can you pull it off? Because I'm gonna say goodnight to you two gentlemen. So.
Maybe. Okay.
You got it.
All right, thanks for keeping it open, and thanks again for what you guys do.
Hey, no worries, man. Hey, love connecting with everybody. So it's great. I appreciate it too. It's my
I
little
tried
bit of-
putting the picture. Did you see? I was trying to show the construction status here.
Sorry, Derek. I for some reason everyone went for dinner tonight, and I was kind of running this by myself. So.
Oh yeah.
There's
yeah.
the view.
I know you love looking at the status.
I do. It's just crazy to think of, like, 16 months ago you had like 30 cranes, and now is it just 6?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 big tower cranes.
Wow.
And
How tall is this going to be?
This is going to be a new library.
How many stories?
Yeah. Only about, I don't know, stories here are kind of tall, but it's maybe going to be about stories maybe.
Wow. It's so funny to say that China is going to have a library, given again, they don't want people to have knowledge. I just think that's kind of a bit of an accident where it's like, here's a library, but we're only giving you our books. We're not giving you any of the.
They don't do that. They're
And those cameras are for everyone's good, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. COVID didn't occur in China. Yeah, that's what Derek's going with. Yeah.
Got kitties and dogs here. Sorry, I got my minor zoo.
No worries, Derek. Okay, I gotta run, guys. I'll catch you guys later. See you soon. Thanks
It was
for your
so
time.
cool seeing the two retrofits back to back and how they did things slightly different.
Yeah, it was neat. Cool. Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Good
All right.
night.